I will admit, this is hard. I have been debating all last night and this morning if I'm going to share this. I am just so enamored with it. It feels like I just walked back in time. So unusual to find a place like this anymore in France. It's just magical here. And I don't know if I want to share where this is. I'm just in love with it. I'm just in love with it. Darlings, today's walk and talk, I have things that absolutely shocked me about the banks here in France. But first I wanted to say that I'm so glad to be home. That trip was really challenging logistically. It was a great discovery. I'm still a little unsure if I want to share a tour of where I was at earlier this week. But I have a whole nother series coming out before I start sharing some more in-depth stuff about Brittany, but I really did love it. In today's walk and talk, I'm going to cut in some images of Pontrieux and Chateau Roche. And if you are interested in renting a car to get to places like that, click on this link above because I share with you my top tips in the week prior about how to rent a car in France. But let's get into today's topic, which is 10 things that really shocked me about the French banking system here. Accumulation of years of experience. All these things, of course, did not happen all at once. But yeah, some people claim and say that the French banking system here is like 10 to 20 years behind what it is in the States. And I was just shocked. Now, not only are some of these a bit generalities that will change by bank, but also could change by your account representative and how willing they are to work with you, because you will find out in today's walk and talk that a lot of it has to do with the relationship that you have with your individual bank representative. The first one that I quickly learned is that you have limits set by your bank. Daily spending limits, weekly, and even monthly. After that, they cut you off from your money. I'm not kidding you. Some banks, you can slightly adjust those limits within the app. Other times you can ask for a specific request with your bank representative and they might allow it for like a 1 month period, then it resets. So yeah, as an example, you might have a daily spending limit of say like 300 euros, which goes pretty quickly considering the cost of groceries and gas these days, right? And then you might have a weekly spending limit. And this is not just like online, it's just in total, how much money is going out of your bank account, and then a monthly limit. So again, you have to ask for a special request and plus the time to process if you want to go above those spending limits. Sometimes they will also make adjustments because you're foreign, and so you might have like sort of these babysitter bumper rules when you first open up a bank account until your bank representative trusts you more. Some people claim that part of the reasoning behind this is to avoid fraud and scams, which is understandable, but there's a lot of expenses when you first arrive in a new country. You have to start a whole new life here. And so, of course, you need to have access to your funds. And it's sort of unnerving, to be honest with you. So the second one is you also have limits at the ATM. As an example, when I first arrived here in France and I got my debit card, I quickly realized that my limit was 300 euros a week. Again, that goes awful quickly when you're buying things that you need. I mean, I could easily spend that at a vide grenier antiques fair. So then voila, it's gone, and you can't pull out any more money from the ATM unless, again, it's a special request. And when you do those special requests, you have to go into your bank branch and you'll tell them how much you need, and they give you a special kind of burner card, and you because your tellers don't distribute money. And so that card, you put it into the ATM machine at the bank, and it spits out the money after they have approved you for that request. It's complicated, isn't it? Number 3 is that the banks act like franchises. Let me explain what I mean by that and why that is a challenge. And I'll use myself as an example. When I first moved full-time to France, I lived in Beaune, which is in Burgundy, and I opened up a bank account there, as one does. And I didn't realize that this was going to possibly be an issue. So let's use an American bank as an example, like Chase or Wells Fargo. Say you live in California, you're visiting New York City, and you want to deposit a check. You wander into the Wells Fargo bank in New York City, you deposit the check, it gets applied to your account, and you move on with your day. You can't do that here. Each bank branch acts individually of its own, even if it's got the same name nationwide, like my bank, Banque Populaire. And so, as an example, now that I live up in Brittany, I can't work with the bank branch up here. My bank is still in Burgundy. And if I wanted to move my accounts up here, it's such an incredibly complicated process that I won't even touch it. And I'll explain how you close a bank account here. It's too much. So keep this in mind as I share with you some of the next few things. You'll start to realize that the fact that they act as franchises makes things even more complicated as I move along. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, this one's a horrible story. Okay, so when you open up a bank account in France, you need to have, like, if you have a partner, a spouse, let's say you're married, okay, they'll put both of your names on the account, but it needs to not be Mr. and Mrs. XYZ. It needs to be Mr. or Mrs. XYZ. The reason being is that, God forbid, one of you passes away. If it says and, it means that both of you need to be available when you go to the bank to do any requests, okay? If it's or, then one or the other person can make, those business transactions, right, with your money. But if one of them passes away and it says and, you're cut off from your money and you have no access to your bank accounts. And this happened to a friend of mine. I'm not kidding you. His wife got cancer and she passed away, and the bank account said and, not or. And so the bank just cut him off. He couldn't pay his rent on their Paris apartment. He didn't have access to be able to pay bills, buy food. And this went on for over a year as they worked on finalizing the estate. And it was just absolutely horrific. So do consider that if you have multiple people on your bank accounts, it has to say or, not and. Isn't that story just absolutely horrific? Can you imagine losing your partner and then going through the trauma also of being completely blocked from all of your money by the bank? And then, don't forget, add in that layer. What if he had moved and his bank representative was halfway across the country on top of that? Thankfully, that was not the scenario, but it's just heartbreaking. So please remember that if you open up a bank account in this country. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? I mean, makes you think twice about some stuff, right? All right, so number 5 is credit cards. They basically don't do that here in France. So if you're thinking, oh, well, I would just get a credit card. Well, unless you've already got one from the country you're coming from, they don't really do credit cards here in this country. So they only issue you debit cards. Number 6 is more of a hassle than anything else. It's really to prevent fraud and scams. But every single transaction that you make through your bank account, like when you go online to, say, purchase groceries or you want to buy something on Amazon, every single transaction, you have to go into the bank application and approve it. So it's just something that you have to know, and it's just a little bit of a hassle, but it's something different that you're learning to do when you move to this country. All right, number 7 is there are maximums also for online transfers. So let's say you're renting an apartment in Paris, or you want to purchase something bigger, like let's say an electric bike to scoot around in. You have a maximum, and that maximum is set not only in the amount that you could transfer, but also going back to that monthly thing, right? And so as an example, for my bank account, it's $3,000. Well, that's pretty easy to hit when you're making a larger purchase, or let's say you're renting a flat in Paris. So every time that you need to go beyond that, then you have to contact your bank representative. This can cause a lot of problems, right? Because if you're trying to do something quickly or efficiently, it's just not going to happen. So you have to plan for it. So number 7 is maximums on bank transfers, which then leads to, and going back to the franchise thing, number 8 is your bank representative approves everything. This person approves any transfers that go over the limit. You want to raise your limit on your daily, weekly, monthly spending. You want to buy something. Essentially, your money is blocked and they have the right to tell you no. For example, I had some work done at my house and it was by a local, and it wasn't anything that needed a permit or anything, but it was a larger project, and I was going to transfer money to this person to pay for his job, but I didn't have an invoice for his work, right? It was just a neighbor helping out. And my bank representative refused to give me my money, let me have access to it, send him a payment because I didn't have an invoice. And so she refused. And there was nothing I could do about it. It feels like it's not your money anymore. Can you see how all of this, when you start putting it all together, it feels like it's not your money anymore. You can't just show up at the bank and pull money out. You can't just have access to it freely whenever you want. And it's sort of unnerving. It really is unnerving. Number 9's a new one. Some of you might come at me, but this has just recently changed. So you used to have a maximum, and I'm talking about US dollars right now, a maximum of 10 grand that you could transfer at any given time, maximum, without triggering additional paperwork to trace where the origin of the funds was, which you don't want to go through that process unnecessarily. But now they've just recently lowered that down to 8,000 US dollars, which of course in euros is less than that. So why is that important? Well, again, creating a new life here in this country is very expensive. And so you have things like you need to buy a car, you need to buy a house, you need to buy furniture. And we all know the cost of everything these days. It's incredibly expensive. 7,500 euros goes by really quickly if you're trying to set up a shop here, or you're just trying to build up your funds. They want to see, when you go through the visa renewal process, the prefecture wants to see a certain amount of savings in your account. And, so you have to be strategic about that, because you can't just ship over a bunch of money all in one go. It's now 8,000 US dollars before it triggers a bunch of paperwork that you have to do to prove where these funds came from. All right, and number 10, also a little unnerving, is that the banks here in France can close your account whenever they want without reason. They have to notify you within 2 months before they actually of the decision. And so you basically have 2 months to figure out what you're going to do next, and then they will close your account. I have heard stories of this happening, especially with Americans because of FATCA, people who have made too many requests or become a pain in the neck for their bank representatives. So that's also something to consider. Like, staying friends with your bank representative is very important in France if you haven't caught on to that yet. And choosing one that's near you that you really like is also important. And as an added bonus, how do you close a bank account in France? Well, you have to send a registered letter to the bank and then return all of your debit cards as well as any unused checks. And then they have to process your request within 30 days. So beyond that, I don't have a lot of information because I haven't gone through that process yet myself. But let's talk about now, before we say goodbye, 4 workarounds or solutions that I have for myself to kind of get around some of these issues and just feel like I'm a little bit more comfortable and in control over my funds in this country. All right, so solution number 1 for me has been using my checkbook. I never wrote checks in the States. But here it's totally normal. It kind of feels like old school. You remember back in like the 80s, for those of you who are a bit older, and you just like, I was younger then, right? But I just have memories of like my mom and my grandmother just whipping out their checkbook all the time, and that had like some sort of pretty pattern on it and the checkbook cover, and they were always writing checks for everything that they did. It's sort of the same thing still here, okay? Again, going back to like France banking system being 10 to 20 years compared to what it is in the States. It feels like that sometimes. So a solution is to use your checkbook whenever possible, especially paying artisans. Some places that's the only option, like paying bills. For example, with Ollie, to register him in France, the only way that I can make the payment to do that was to send in the actual physical form with my original signature and a check for 12 euros. So that, I wish that was so, I keep telling everybody, I'm like, I wish it was that easy to become French. Like, he just had to have some vaccinations in a form and to pay 12 euros, and now he's French. I'm like, how can I be jealous of a dog? You know? Other solutions that I often see are popular is keeping cash on hand, right? Using the ATM or bringing over cash and kind of creating a little bit of a buffer, mattress money, as you would say. And then I know a lot, especially Americans, keep an American credit card. And it's just something that you constantly use. Even sometimes your French bank debit cards don't work on some sites, and your American credit card will. Then solution or backup option number 4 is debit card in system like Wise, N26, or Revolut. Those 3 are the most popular with expats and immigrants here in France, and they will issue you a debit card and an IBAN. European, it's not French. It's not always accepted by everybody here in France, so it's not the perfect solution. Of course, you don't get a checkbook with that. So the last thing then is, after all this, you're probably thinking, why the heck would you even want or need a French bank account then? So here are just a few reasons why. So yeah, buying a house or a car. If you're renting, many landlords will want you to have a French bank account. They want the funds in this country. The checkbook thing, right? I keep bringing it up, but you can't have a checkbook with Wise, Revolut, N26, or some of these other situations. The only way to get a checkbook in this country is to have a French bank account. If you are like me and you are a business owner in this country, it is a legal requirement to have a French bank account. Sometimes paying certain utility bills or taxes, your carte vitale. These are all reasons why you would want or need a French bank account. So what do you think about all of that? Does that kind of change your mind about certain things about banking or moving to a country like France? I don't know what it's like in other countries like Spain and Italy that are popular to immigrate to, but I would love your thoughts on this. So be sure to put down in the comments below what you thought about what I just shared with you. Money is so important, and I think this one really hits a lot of nerves. It certainly has hit mine a few times and has thrown me into a bit of a panic. So hopefully for those of you who are perhaps in the process of moving to this country, this information will also help you. So I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Bisous, bonne journée, and I will see you next week.